Okay, we're in public session.
Good morning, everybody. We have full house today, although we are spread out. So we will do our best to take advantage of our video hookups. And the first order of business is the consideration of our minutes from our public session of our last meeting, August 9th. Are there comments or questions?
I move we accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Judge Corrett seconds. We're going to raise our hands for those in support of the motion to adopt the minutes. Deb, are you able to see everybody?
Yes, we are, Chair.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Hi. Can you move in so Commissioner Foster?
We're voting on the minutes. Did you have any comments or questions, Commissioner Smalls?
No.
She does not. Are you in favor of adopting the minutes?
I am.
Okay. So, seeing that it's unanimous, are there any noes? Seeing none, the motion is adopted unanimously. Seth, I'm going to turn over things to you for the moment, and you're going to give us a report on 5 items. And why don't we start with the hiring update?
You got it. We'll start off with the hiring update. Since our last meeting, when the reorganization and restructuring of JCOPE was approved, we have filled several counsel and audit positions. We've kept you up to date on those. There are still some positions to be filled. We are still looking to fill a position of communications assistant. We're looking for an auditor and for filing specialists as well to aid in the paperwork and all the other analysis we do. So those positions have been posted, and we're looking to fill those. So that's, in terms of a hiring update, that is where we are. FDS Compliance. I can turn FDS Compliance over to Leah if she is over in the city.
Go ahead, Leah.
Sure, thank you. Staff is working through the compliance process for the financial disclosure statements filed by state employees, legislative members and staff, candidates for office, and other state officers and officials. This is the first year that we are handling compliance through our new online filing system. We recently sent confidential failure to file notices to state employees who did not file their statements in May. Filers are provided with the opportunity to submit their statements, and the next step, if necessary, is to send a notice of delinquency, which under the statute is required to be made publicly available. We also send confidential failure to file notices, followed by notices of delinquency where necessary to candidates for office this year, and the list of delinquent filings is posted on our website. To the extent required, we will follow up on continued failures to file through our enforcement process.
Thanks, Leah. Seth, do you want to talk about the budget, or turn that over to somebody else?
I'll take it. The 2017-2018 state fiscal year budget, we are waiting for the call letter from DOB. In anticipation of that, we've been reviewing our needs and doing some work. Steve has been taking the lead in that. We anticipate having that call letter before our November meeting for sure. I'd like to set up a meeting of the management committee to talk about that. We may get that letter in between, as we probably will, between meetings. So before we do our final submission, have a management committee meeting to go over that.
Great. And Deb will call around to the members of the management committee to find out about their availability. Okay. Where are we with our emergency regulations?
In accordance with the August meeting and the directives of the Commission, those regulations for source of funding, as well as the combined adjudicatory appeal regulations have been posted, not just on our website, but in the state register. The final public comments are due 10/29, so towards the end of October. That'll be just after the October meeting. We anticipate taking those comments into account and bringing forth to the Commission at the November meeting those final regulations. There are other regulations we're working on, which is the next bullet point, but for the moment I'm just addressing those that were issued as emergency regs in light of the immediate effective date of the adjudicatory regulations and the 30 days that we had from the time the governor signed the bill in August to put out source of funding regulations.
Great. Thank you. And then the last item on the staff report is the plan for developing lobbying act regulations. Wanted you address that for us, if you would.
Certainly. Going back many months, staff has been working on a set of comprehensive lobbying regulations. So for the first time in New York, there'll be a single coherent, cohesive body of guidance on lobbying, enforceable as regulations rather than as guidance, and rather than using the advisory opinion as an avenue for effectuating changes. We're in the process of still drafting those, and it's we are looking at our existing guidelines and precedent going back to the State Lobbying Commission. This kind of goes hand in hand with the structural reorganization we did in August. In August, JCOPE created a separate division of lobbying. We now have a director of lobbying, and under the director of lobbying is lobbying guidance, lobbying filing, and then ultimately there'll be compliance with lobbying. So there'll be one-stop shopping, as it were, for folks, for the public, for getting information on lobbying, and for the lobbying in the regulated community to get advice and guidance. That reorg chart is on the website, so we ended up posting that also, by the way, at the end of the August meeting. We're also in the process of creating a lobbying app. I can't explain the technical difficulties and vicissitudes of dealing with a lobbying app. It's been worked on for some time. We're still in the process of doing that. But I think it's part of an effort that the Commission is leading to deal with lobbying issues effectively and in a manner that's user-friendly to the lobbying community, so that information can be readily collected and made available to the public and can be analyzed. We believe that given the amount of money that the Commission's reported being spent on lobbying, that having these regulations out there is a proactive way to address this very complicated regulatory process. And we do have a wealth of guidance to draw on, but a lot of it's outdated. A lot of it's just not relevant anymore to the real world and to modes of communication and to the problems that the public has dealing with lobbyists and that lobbyists have with ensuring that they comply with the law. The suggestion that staff is making, and consistent with what the Commission has wanted, is that we're going to make it an open and transparent process, more open and transparent than otherwise required by SAPA, the State Administrative Procedure Act. To this end, this is what we're suggesting to the Commission. We expect to have draft regulations numbering 50, 60 pages within the next couple of weeks. As I said, these have been bounced around for months, and ideas floated and ideas shot down. The idea would be to get public comment, input from the public, from good government groups, from the regulated community, from electeds, whoever would want to provide useful, practical commentary on this before we formally go into the SAP process. To that end, we'd like, and ultimately, the decision is going to be left with the Commission as to what, if any, part of these regulations will be formally promulgated for SAPA. But to get this process rolling and just to start getting these comments in, consistent with what the Commission has done in the past, We're suggesting that we post this draft as a staff draft on the website. Pre-SAPA, no imprimatur of the commission on it as a way of stimulating conversation. We believe that the issues that we're addressing on procedure, on filing, on defining lobbying activity is fairly uncontroversial, but being laid out in this fashion, I think will definitely invite comment. And there may be issues that we're missing or practical ways of dealing with matters that are not addressed in those regulations. We would post them on the website, have informal comment for several months. And we also would suggest that we do a public hearing on the regulations, ensuring that the hearing takes place after the regulations have been out for a considerable amount of time, couple of months, so that there is time for interested parties to comment on those. It would be hearing or hearings. My thought is we could do the hearing, at least certainly do a very large hearing with a large panel of folks down in New York City. During this whole process, we would be engaging with the regulated community and the public and the good government groups. We would take those regulations, incorporate those suggestions and changes, and then bring them to the commission for action. And rather than addressing 50 or 60 pages at one meeting, the suggestion would be that we take logical blocks of regulations. For example, regulations dealing with biennial filings, dealing with client registration, dealing with certain matters as a group, having the commission take the time to absorb the comments and then work on those piecemeal. When that is done, we would have a coherent body of lobbying regulations, and then we would put that out for the formal SAPA process. So the commission's final iteration of those regulations would be then commented again through the public comment process, and from that we would have the final regulations. This will take some time, but staff believes that within the next few weeks, couple of weeks, we're going to have a workable working draft covering all the issues. And what we're going to the commission now and asking is the authorization to have that posted on our site for comment and start the process in the manner we've suggested. I think what we'll end up doing is producing a calendar for the commission so we can time out and make sure that there is time for the commission to analyze each of these very, very complicated elements and ensure that the public comment is received as well.
Thanks, Seth. I had a couple of questions. One is, I know you said that you're going to prepare for the commissioners a rough timeline of the steps that you just outlined, but do you have a sense of when the hearings that we as the commission would hold would actually take place? Do you have a sense of when you think that would happen?
I'm going to suggest that we get the hearings done before the end of the year and before the legislative session begins. If there are suggestions and points made that bring out issues that maybe can't be addressed in the regulatory process but need to be addressed in the legislative process in this very open manner, I'd like to. I think it's important to get that teed up before the session. The way legislative sessions run, things sometimes get lost. I would rather it was teed up as early in the session or pre-session so that those matters that have been identified can't be ignored. So I would suggest an aggressive timeline in terms of the hearing and in terms of getting public comments in, so at least those issues are up front in time for the legislative session to address those matters. And then over a period of three sessions, 3 commission meetings, breaking the regulations down into constituent parts and working through those as well. This might time well with the release of assuming this lobbying app is fully functional, and it may sync with the release of that app as well. So we'll kind of enter the 21st century in terms of keeping track of lobbying information, and also have, for the first time in New York, these comprehensive lobbying regulations.
And I'm going to ask the commissioners, and obviously the staff will help us here, as these hearings, the planning for these hearings becomes more concrete, we'll obviously want to accommodate as many of your schedules as possible so that we can have as many commissioners as possible participate in the hearings. When we have had hearings in the past, we've had a good core group of commissioners come. Obviously, it's not a full commission meeting, but we want to make sure that, as Seth is saying, that the commission, because ultimately it is our responsibility to make decisions about whatever lobbying regulations we choose to adopt or not to adopt, we need to be participants, obviously, completely in that process. And so I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in the hearings. Obviously, we're a large group, so, we'll have to make, sometimes we have to make accommodations. But the idea is that, I think, as Seth is saying, is that, it'll give us an opportunity to engage directly with stakeholders in the regulations, whether it's the lobbying community, the good government groups, or the electeds, or the members of the public. So, I'll turn it open to the commission if folks have questions about it, but I'm sure Seth will keep us updated on how things pan out. Great. Dawn.
Will the hearings all occur in Albany, or are we?
I think Seth said that he would like to do at least one hearing here in New York City, and I think in part, and he can explain it, but I think that's in part to accommodate commissioners' schedules so that, we can have a hearing here, perhaps we'll have a hearing in Albany, so that, again, we can maximize the participation of commissioners while at the same time address, as Seth said, there are myriad and comprehensive issues. So it would seem, based, I think, on what Seth is saying, that you certainly could put two hearings together, perhaps one here, one in Albany, where, we divide up thematically different issues. So I hope that answers your question, Dawn. All right. Unless there are any other comments or questions, at this point, I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Executive Law 9419B. Judge Roth moves. Is there a second? Commissioner Small seconds. All in favor, raise your hand.
Good to go.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried, and we will enter into executive session. When we complete our work in the executive session, we will return to public session, and to the extent permitted by law, we will report on the business that we've conducted in our executive session. Thank you.
Drop everything off Tuesday.
Mr. Chair, we're back in public session.
All right, during the executive session, the commission received an update on a number of litigation matters from our counsel. We considered and authorized a request by the staff to contact certain state agencies regarding delinquent FDS filings. We considered and approved 2 requests pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 73, subsection 8B. We considered and approved 2 settlements of substantial basis investigations. We considered and opened 4 new substantial basis investigations. We considered and closed 3 matters, but authorized the staff to provide guidance to the subjects of those investigations, and we closed 4 investigative matters. We received an update from our staff on 6 open investigative matters, and the commission considered and resolved to give the staff authority to issue and take certain investigative actions, including the issuance of 15-day letters regarding possible investigations, and to supplement additional 15-day letters that the commission has already issued. We also considered a number of other possible investigative matters. If there is no other business before the commission at this time, I'll consider a motion to adjourn and meet again for our next scheduled meeting, which is Wednesday, October 26th. Is there a motion to adjourn? Senator Rath, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Weissman, all in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, we stand adjourned, and to those who celebrate the Jewish holidays, L'Shana Tova.